together and check in sometime.
Good morning and welcome to the local JRAC work group of the Justice Reinvestment Advisory Council. My name is Chris Goff. I am an Associate Justice on the Indiana Supreme Court, and I serve as the Chair of State JRAC. Before we begin, I have a couple of announcements. First, I would like to welcome Kelly Welker, who is joining the work group representing the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. I'd also like to welcome Mike Bieberstein, who is from FBT Gibbons, and he is attending today on behalf of Steve Luce and the Indiana Sheriff's Association. Finally, I would like to remind members that on July 1st, the JRAC statutes were amended and now require members to be in person to vote on matters before the council. Members can direct any questions about this change to Jenny Bauer and Michelle Goodman. Seeing that we do have a quorum, I'll call the meeting to order. The first item of business is review of the proposed minutes from our June 12th, 2026 work group meeting. Prior to today's meeting, a copy of those proposed minutes was distributed to all members. If there are no changes, corrections, or discussions with respect to the proposed minutes, I would entertain a motion and second to approve them.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Judge Spitzer.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, David. There is a motion and a second to approve the proposed minutes from the June 12th work group meeting. Is there any further discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the proposed minutes will stand approved as presented. Thank you. The next item for consideration by the group is the 2025 annual report. And for presentation regarding the report, I'll turn the floor over to Chris Bean. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. This is the agenda item that never leaves. I'll keep saying this. I left it open for submissions much later this year. I'm glad we did. I checked it again last night, and I had just gotten a submission even yesterday evening from a judge. But to summarize, I will have the report ready for the October meeting for this body to review and comment on and approve for it to go to the full state JRAC for approval. I don't know that this is going to change. Behavioral health and substance use disorder treatment access remains the dominant theme across the 78 responses that we've received. That's pretty good. So 78 out of 90 local JRACs have responded to the survey. Reentry services and housing are the second most noted priority, and then of course funding sustainability. And it does feel like, it sounds like the counties are still sort of figuring this out. Not only the effects that Senate Enrolled Act 1 is going to have, although I can tell you, and I'm sure Angie can tell you, they're realizing what those effects are. The opioid settlement funds, which we really started asking about last year, remains really, really uneven in how those things are being discussed and how they're being distributed. Service gaps, housing, mental health treatment, transportation, and long-term residential treatment are again, the most consistently identified gaps. Rural counties note that even where services, and I thought this was an interesting, I think just term that one county used, a very rural county, to describe what this is, and that is a rural distance tax. So the cost of individuals, even where they may have services, to access those services. Some of the local JRACs have been, I suppose, creative in creating transportation using opioid settlement funds to create transportation across counties, even into other counties. Data and performance measurement, which we'll talk a little more about. Angie will talk about it. I will talk about one sort of response to the continued requests for more data, but we're still developing data and performance measures are still developing in most counties. Formal adoption of performance measures remains limited. Again, that's something that we will talk about in a way that we're trying to help out. And then a communication gap. We have a work group that is fairly recently stood up, so there will be an update from the communications work group but several counties noted their fiscal body rarely or never consults JRAC on budget decisions. So this is an area where they would like a bit more communication. So again, I promise by the next meeting, the report will be finalized. If you have any suggestions in how you feel like it would be more effectively sort of transmitted, there is no sort of prescribed format for the report. Historically, it's been somewhere around a 20-page report with graphs. I know that's not always the most effective way to get this information out. So I am open to any kind of creative ideas, whether it's a series of one-pagers about the various things that have been identified. But feel free to send me or have a conversation. We can have a conversation right now if you think there's a better way to receive this information. Please.
Open it up. Bernice, please.
This is not on where you just left off, but point of clarification and then a question. When you referred to Senate Enrolled Act 1, you're talking about the tax cuts.
Yes, I
No,
should.
I just want to be sure. So here's my question. With respect to the local tax cuts, I've seen school corps present data on the money they would lose in light of SEA 1. But I wondered if anyone knows, or Chris, if you know, if there's been something comparable on the criminal legal side to be able to say, you know, here's the impact on our, especially as we're going into a budget session, if anyone knows of any study or work done to kind of capture those losses.
There've been extensive conversations, communications surrounding grant funding and cuts of grant funding. And I think there's movement on that front. That's been the priority. And so what I was thinking, Bernice, and I'm glad David is here. And frankly, I'm glad Kelly's got a seat at the table here today too. There's a tremendous appetite for guidance as to how to use opioid settlement money, how to organize your local justice system so that you can have a unified voice saying this is a pressing need and we're aligned. I think the challenge is you've got a lot of different units of government that have money that they're not quite sure what to do with, and they're being pulled multiple directions. What I would propose is we need to plug you in, David and Kelly, maybe between now and the next meeting, to sort of just brainstorm best ideas that we have. I would also say, just to throw out there for this, I became the chair of the Appellate Judges Conference of the ABA last weekend, and part of my role is to organize programming. A lot of times it's just these big phone calls. We did that when we had the JRAC rollout, and we were talking about mental health in particular. But I think we might have the opportunity to leverage some outside resources to sort of speak to a wider audience about an issue of national concern and really kind of direct folks that way. I say all that because I think if we had a substantive deliverable to say, hey, local JRACs, here's something that you need to convene about because there's funding involved to meet essential needs, I think that they would get it a lot faster than if we were just trying to say, for example, this, and have another meeting to talk about something that is not really particularly important to them when they're trying to put out fires constantly. The other piece of that is that if we had that group convened and we had a plan, yeah, it would accelerate the conversation. But I think that would be a really important way for us to meet a pressing need. That the communities are concerned about funding, not only because they've got open questions with respect to if they view it as loss. I'm sure, David, your constituents do. I think members of the General Assembly see this as now there's an opportunity for you to shift, but that's easier said than done, especially when they're in crisis. So if we can stand up something that's meaningful for them, that would be helpful. I only offer the discussion about taking a slightly different platform because that might be a way for us to, as I said, leverage outside resources. It wouldn't be something we'd have to necessarily expend any money to do, and that might kind of accelerate our ability to do it, especially if we're able to put together like an Indiana specific panel, say here's the deliverable, and I would just be interested to talk to you, David, and Kelly to see if there's anything that's sort of done the same way across every state. So, I know we go to NACO, they have a lot of common concern, but if we could do something that was sort of not Indiana specific, that'd be helpful. I think that there would be some carryover across the states with that. And that's just a thought. And I would just like to have that conversation within the next, month or so anyway, so that we can hopefully have something to roll out. And that might help when we were, trying to get our communications work group sort of jump started. Does that make sense, or does that just sound like a bad idea?
I think it makes sense, and I would love to include Shelby Thomas from Criminal Justice Institute. She's the one who's kind of overseeing the local side of it. And then I know I've worked very closely with David and then also AIM, because we do have 648 local units of government receiving funds.
Can I ask? Justice Goff and I were in a meeting earlier this week, and I heard a legislator indicate that the impacts of Senate Enrolled Act 1 were not what everybody was thinking, and that as a matter of fact, there would be more revenue rather than less. That has not been necessarily the message that I've gotten locally or from other people, but I'm not an expert certainly in the local finance area. And I don't know, Dave, if your group has done like an analysis, and if that is true, then there's maybe a disconnect in terms of messaging. And if it's not true, then there's a disconnect with regards to funding. So can you enlighten that?
And I know Justice Goff and some of the staff here, I met with Jamie Bolser on our staff and gone through some of the existing revenue streams. But I do think there is a little bit of disconnect between the Senate Enrolled Act 1 narrative and what actually happened. And that I think that disconnect is sometimes placed where we would have received 4% growth, but we only received 2% growth because of Senate Bill 1. But it's still growth, right? So,
okay.
so that's where some of the financial, if locals hire financial consultants, sometimes they show that number of what you would have received if Senate Enrolled Act 1 hadn't passed. And so we do know that for counties, they grew overall on average, their actual collections year over year grew about 1.7%, which is below inflation on the property tax side.
Yeah.
And again, it would have been, probably another $1 billion higher if Senate Enrolled Act had not passed. So we're going through all that with our members, and there's really only been a few counties we've seen where actual collections were less in 26 than in 25. Because you're still using statewide averages, right? But like one county, the projection was they were going to lose between 1.5 and $2 million, go backwards. They collected $87,000 less in 26 than they did in 25. So again, that doesn't account for inflation, but I think it kind of shows that we still had some growth, just not as much as we would have. So again, that narrative is out there, and I will say that our members realize that these changes to property tax are not finished. And so I think a lot of them are even pulling back more to say, well, we don't know what the next step is. Right. And in Senate Enrolled Act 1, some of the changes are phased in over 3 or 4 years. And so as the new deductions for the benefit taxpayers are implemented, we will see sort of a leveling off of any growth. But at least for 25, 26, on average, units received more money than they did the previous year. And then I was going to talk a little bit about this later, but in the communications. But if any of your agencies, we have a plethora now of videos that talk about Senate Enrolled Act 1 and the changes that were made and the ramifications of that going forward. And then many of you have probably heard about the changes in the income tax structure, which again are being phased in over the next couple of years. And we did a video, Jamie and I did a video that talked about the changes on income taxes. And why that's so important to this group is many of the existing income tax revenue streams are dedicated to like the jail local income tax or the public safety income tax. And that helps fund jail operations, court operations, public defenders, prosecutors. And so those categories are going away, going forward, it would appear, at least, not until 2028 now. So the counties have a new revenue stream, and we just call it the county service rate. So all those individualized rates dedicated to public safety are now going to be rolled under the 1.2% that counties will have for public service rate. The difference is if your county has a specific statute that says you can have 0.25 for jail bonds, that remains outside the 1.2 until those bonds are paid off. But we've kind of been told going forward, we're not doing special income tax rates above and beyond the normal cap. So you have to now fund those jail expansions or new construction and operations under the 1.2%. So that's a pretty significant change. And in the video we did, we talked about the General Assembly has created this group called it's called the MUST Committee, Municipal. I don't think what the MUST stands for. I'll think about it here in a minute. But so the county can call the MUST group together, and it's one county council representative and each of the fiscal officers of each of the towns. And they're supposed to get together and look at the current income tax revenue streams, where they come from as far as within the county and how they're divided out. And so the big change going forward, the General Assembly is looking at, currently income taxes are distributed based on levies or property taxes. So the more you spend in property taxes, the more income tax you receive. And so many communities were disproportionately benefiting from having high property taxes. And so as a unit of government, I had no incentive not to take my maximum property taxes, because if I didn't, my income tax stream was tied to that, and other units received my income tax stream. So under the new system, sorry to go into local government finance for you all, but under the new system, the county will have an income tax rate that the county council votes in, and all that money will come to the county. The cities above 3,500 will have an option to do their own income tax rate, and all that money will be generated from the people who live in the cities, and that'll be their money. And then there's sort of a mix of two other income taxes that we have reviewed, and it's called the fire EMS lit local income tax. So the difference with that is that's a countywide tax base, and that could be up to 0.4%. So that's the first thing we urge counties to do, is look at your fire EMS lit. It doesn't include other public safety. It's just fire EMS. So I don't know why it was designed that way necessarily, but and then the county council votes that in, and then that's distributed based on a formula that the county council distributes. And then there's something called the small municipal income tax, and the county council establishes that tax. And again, that's using the countywide tax base, but cities have the opportunity to agree to that small municipal income tax that the county council votes in. But we're probably going to see where that rate, even though it's a countywide tax base, may not be sufficient to replace the revenue some cities are receiving today, because again, the money they receive today is not based on where money comes from. It's based on how much money you spent on the property tax side. So we've seen this debate for, gosh, I hate to bore you all with this, but for 10 years, probably, a lot of cities and towns said, we want our own rate. We want to control our own destiny. The counties are adopting these jail rates, which help the county's funding, but it doesn't do anything for the cities and towns. So Senate Bill 1 created this municipal income tax, and there's a debate on whether or not the rate that they're receiving, that they're allowed to receive of 1.2%, is sufficient to replace the money they're receiving today. And so we're having these discussions about, what the rate should be for each unit. The local income tax rate cap now is 2.9%, which is lower than the current cap. But the current cap includes property tax relief money, so that provision goes away going forward. So in a long way of saying, the General Assembly's created these MUST committees And they're trying to get the local units together to talk about and discuss and educate themselves on where income tax money is generated from and where it's spent. So in our video, we urge our public safety partners, if they can, to send somebody to the MUST committee and start talking about, don't forget, county council, we currently receive funding from the public safety tax or the jail lit or the judicial lit. And we want to make sure when you adopt a new rate that it's sufficient to recognize those current expenditures. Now, the MUST committee is just to make recommendations to the General Assembly. They're non-binding. But we are encouraging our members to have this discussion, to identify where income taxes are being collected from what municipalities, how much in the unincorporated area and so forth, and then discuss how to distribute that. A really important part of our platform is, though, a recognition that everybody in the county gets access to the judicial system, the jail, the public safety, right? So that rate has to be uniform throughout the county, right? That's really important to us because we don't want to say, well, I live in the city, so I don't pay the same income tax rate to the county as somebody in the unincorporated area, because it doesn't matter. They all have access to the courts, right? So, sorry, hit the table there if I made a noise. Yeah. But anyway, all these changes are going on and we're trying to educate our members about them. So lots of, as you can expect, it creates a lot of sort of anxiety amongst our members for long-term planning, because we know the General Assembly is probably going to come back next year and recalibrate the income tax structure again, probably recalibrate property taxes again. So it's just hard to do long-term planning when your revenue stream is constantly changing, I guess. So.
This is the concern that I have, and I've talked with Justice Goff about this as well. We're getting ready to go into budget cycle. And so we've kind of got a little bit of this perfect storm of uncertainty on the local finance side. We've lost some money for community corrections and things like that. We're working on that. Hopefully that's something that's going to be addressed. But the risk is then that counties are going to say, we're not going to continue with programming that are alternatives to incarceration. And this has a trickle up issue with DOC. I know we're already kind of dealing with some of that at that level too. And so, I feel that messaging is so important from this standpoint, as that if we go into this budget cycle and the decisions are made, we're going to cut this program, we're going to cut that program that are alternatives to incarceration. I've said before, one of the easiest things that I do is send somebody to DOC. I'll bang my gavel, I write an order, there they go, they're out of my community and I don't have to worry about it anymore, but it's really expensive for the state. I don't think that's the best way to handle most situations, and we've proved that we can handle things locally, and this is part of what this group does. But as we go into these budget cycles, if local jurisdictions are saying, this is so uncertain that we cannot continue this programming at this point, then I'm just afraid that a lot of this stuff that has been successful in the past at keeping people out of DOC, and then of course we know sort of the follow-on effects when people do get to DOC and back, and how that just becomes more expensive once people come back and we try and reintegrate them. This is kind of a perfect storm here, and I'm worried about that. And so, to the extent that we can message maybe that, it's not as bad as it seems, or, their help is on the way, or let's wait and see before we, I think it would be important if we feel that we can responsibly make that message, I feel that it's important that we do so. And Ashley's probably got some thoughts too. We've talked a little bit on this issue, but I do know that I'm just talking with other judges that there are those considerations that are being made about stopping some of those programs.
Yeah, I've had a lot of feedback. I've had a lot of conversations in the last month or so since the grant awards come out. For instance, Judge Trockman down in Evan Fuller, yeah. He's got a problem-solving court of 120 in his docket. And it was completely unfunded. And he said, if I stopped tomorrow, they all go to DOC.
Yeah.
And it's just those numbers
Mhm.
that are significant. And like you said, it's that trickle-down effect. It all goes right back to the jails. It goes to the prisons. So the local entities that are pulling back on everything, changes at the local entities with the SEA one, it is the perfect storm in all areas. And we don't really have a solution, because even if we get funding restored to that 72 million, because programs are shutting down and they're not filling vacancies and they're overloaded with the caseloads and things are actually being discontinued, they're going to need more money to restart back up. It's not going to be that same amount that was sufficient to
Or the community
operate.
feels burns and said, we went down this road before and the funding went away, so why would we do this again?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing. It's a lot of work to run a problem-solving court or to run a community corrections program, and a lot of effort. And, if you feel like you're going to do it, restart it again for a couple of years and then it goes away, I mean, it's just, those are the concerns that I have.
And we have the concern of when these individuals are either let go or, repurposed locally, that finding the employment or that position to fill it again,
Yeah.
we're already struggling with, hiring. We made adjustments to the local rules because we
Yeah.
couldn't find individuals with bachelor's degrees,
Mhm.
which was that initial standard. So you then will see our state bringing down the bar, bringing down the expectations, bringing down the standards, which then will ultimately impact the outcomes.
Yeah, I will say, I've probably received as many calls about the community correction funding in the last 30 days than about Senate Bill 1 itself. I don't want it to sound like Senate Bill 1 is rosy. I'm not saying that everything's fine, because it is, our revenue is growing much slower than anticipated and probably below inflation. So there are still decisions that need to be made. But to your point, one thing we always encourage counties to do if they shut down a program like this and the jail population is going to increase, the exponential growth in their liability insurance is pretty dramatic, right? And so if your daily population is going to increase from 200 to 250, your liability insurance carrier is going to notice that, and we have increased liability, and that's a huge and unknown cost, right? You just don't know how much that's going to increase. So trying our best to, again, educate our members on what's happening. Again, be happy to attend any of your all's conferences and discuss some of these things again, or give you access to some of the videos we've done that explains changes that have occurred and the changes that are to occur over the next couple of years. But it's a difficult spot just because the revenue stream is so soft. It's hard for us to count on 2, 3, 4 years down the road, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, I just want to offer two things for the group's consideration, and I hope it comes as some good news. I can't share any specifics. I don't know for certain, but I feel confident in saying I believe that much of the grant funding is probably going to be restored, and I think it's largely because the work that this group has done. Had conversations with folks at DOC, and also had conversations with members of the General Assembly. Was able to convey, I think, effectively to the chief, and was able to swing some of our key administrative staff into action to articulate in a way that's just not evident that this is a poor financial choice. Like it seems like, cutting.
It's a very nice way of saying it.
Well, but let me just say why that's so difficult. I mean, let's don't play the blame game. I don't think that's very helpful when you're doing what we do in public safety. The reason that it's hard for people to see is because we're siloed and we have a disconnected, non-unified justice system. So you've got the state spends about 1% on the justice system, on the judicial branch. Counties on average spend 70% of their budgets on the justice system. And, this big shift happens for reasons that aren't dictated by public safety, that we're gonna afford property tax relief. Yeah, you know, here's what I think is really important. When David was talking, I always think, I'm so glad that he's given us his time, and I'll sit here, because so much is in your head that if you were ever not here, David, we would lose it. But here's the practical problem as I see it. We put in this JRAC statute as a means to simplify things, because if the DOC makes an internal decision, there's a group of folks that manage that can make a decision, and that sort of governs what happens in the organization. Local justice doesn't work that way, because we have all these different independent groups that have to have a common goal. They have to recognize it, have to pull in the same direction. So all of this fiscal information that's in flux is being sort of surged through a bunch of part-time county council members, county commissioners, that, you know, David has to have great effort expended to try and get them, you know, literate on that. And it's very difficult to do because they have day jobs. And so the amount of knowledge that's available at a county, really, it just depends on, you know, the ability of that local member to absorb and then effectively communicate. But then here's the other practical problem is, unfortunately, too many of our judges have said, hey, Ashley, hey, Angela, you take over JRAC. And then these guys are busy putting out all the fires and supervising the ankle bracelets and everything. And so they're the leadership, and this is not in their wheelhouse. So what I really think would be important is, maybe if we have a couple of our staff attorneys maybe look at these videos in earnest. I'd be happy to have some more conversation with you, David, and probably take you up on your offer to, it may be too late for our annual conference now because that agenda's set, but I'd like to think about something real quick to roll out. Maybe we could do that in December, because I think what we need to do is we need to have the judges understand this is what you need to do. You need to convene the locals in a way so that you can understand what's in flux, what actually is not, the sky's not falling. What do you need to do as an alternative? And they also do need to hear from Ashley and Angela, but I don't think it's fair for IACAC or Popeye to be sort of shouldering the burden. So we need to equip our judges to sort of be taking the lead on that. And the benefit really is, you know, I say I can't promise anything, but I feel sort of confident that that funding is going to be restored, because I think everybody understands now that you can't make these big decisions that affect lots of people or bad things happen. And so while everybody's kind of under that same understanding, we might have an opportunity to engage, you know, the other branches of government in earnest. Kelly's here. We got to see the table of the executive branch, and I've had an opportunity to speak to a lot of legislators the last month or so, and I know that they're interested and they want to do what'll help the community. So, but I do think it's really important for us to sort of lead the charge on that. That's what this is for. And we're in a moment right now where I think we can get some things done that will really help people. So that's what I'd like to. I don't think we have any of our staff attorneys here today. And I mean, they're pulled about 30 different directions.
Double booked
right
today.
Yeah. But that's just sort of the nature of the game. I could tell you 10 or 15 conversations that we're having. They're all related to this right now. Good news is they're all lining up in a way that I can keep saying the same thing over and over, and it works at all those meetings.
Well, Judge, I would like to Justice, I would like to just reiterate that I feel like right now the judges are all fired up and all are on board, and they're all ready to do the action and do what they need to do. And I think it's because Judge Spitzer, you know, leading that charge and making sure all that information is getting to everybody in all corners of the state. But they all understand and they all see locally the impact that these programs have had on their systems and, you know, the outcomes and the results. And I think that was what JRAC and all of these evidence-based practices were created to do. And people at the local level do see it. So I think with them reiterating it to the level, you know, the state level, and really getting everyone educated on what the purpose was and that we were succeeding. We're doing what we set out to do. And I think you'll have the support from the judges, because I know from just the conversations I've had, they're all reaching out, asking what can they do, where can they help, what is their role, and so I think this is the time that you can rally any and everyone across the state.
I agree. Denise Simden is joining us from Center for Effective Public Policy, and she has in the immediately preceding few years been doing a really good job, her organization, of providing technical assistance at the county level. I know in speaking with Chris that sort of a pivot to some of that technical assistance so that she can sort of serve a train the trainer role with our internal staff to go out and sort of force multiply what's happening. And I've had a prior conversation with her. I just want to sort of pivot back to that again, Denise, while you're here. Last week, I had a conversation with really important member of the General Assembly, Greg Steuerwald. And this, you know, he just did so much in this area over the past couple decades. And we were talking about JRAC, and he said, you know, I always tell the young guys, use JRAC. That was created for. And I must say, it never really occurred to me that there's been so much turnover that just there's a lot of folks, even in the General Assembly, that don't understand structurally the benefits of using this system. And so I just say that, Denise, because I mentioned to you before that I think it might be helpful for your group to sort of tailor a program for the state players in this system to sort of come in and train them on how this system is structured, the benefit it can have to make sure that scarce criminal justice resources get allocated where they're most needed. And there's a plan for those things that we have gaps in. And I thank you and for planning and doing that with the judicial branch. I think they're doing our folks have to do the heavy lifting in the communities, but it is really important for the executive to know how that structure works for planning purposes. And it's really important for members of the legislature to know so that they're always thinking about that in terms of the fiscal component. And yeah, I'll stop talking, but I just think that there's a real emergency for us to get some of that information stream flowing as effectively as possible so we can get everybody sort of moving in the same direction. Well, there's interest in all this stuff, right? So that's, in between now and the next meeting, if we could, Chris, let's have some folks get internally there with David to make sure that we're consuming that information. Like to have sort of a plan to boil down. This is sort of the high points the judges need to be aware of, and really maybe sort of think about developing a all-in plan to roll out, opioid settlement discussions through their local JRACs.
That's good. I mean, we kind of advocate that, I don't want to say easy, but providing a lot of that money or all of it or substantially most of it to the local JRAC to distribute kind of takes it off the county council and commissioner's plate. They don't have to sit there and evaluate each program because they have subject matter experts on the local JRAC who do that. So I know there are a few counties who basically just, it's 100% pass through to the local JRAC. And other counties, I think, try to evaluate each program individually as council and commissioners, as you're talking about, they're part-time, they may not have the subject matter expertise. And so if we can, again, we'll support the local control option in that, but if we can share that narrative, like this is an easy, get it off your plate, make sure it's being spent appropriately option, I think passing it through the JRAC is a good idea. So.
Do you guys hear that? I agree. I think it would be easy if I think we do. I mean, I really do, because they'd like to not have to worry about that. Right. And I think you're right, Ashley. I think everybody is ready to get some stuff done. It can be very helpful when you have the power to make things better yourself. So I think that'd be a good news thing. I'd like you guys to have some component in it, because I don't know if you know how important you are to you do, but I mean, I think it's important to highlight that because all the judges know the work that your folks do. And so
even if it's temporary for this decrease in funding for community corrections, even if they direct some of that to that program, at least on a temporary basis, again, you don't want to commit that long term because opioid money has a end life.
Yeah.
But in the short term, that could be something to kind of bridge the gap until the General Assembly meets again and reevaluates funding.
Great idea.
I was just gonna say, when we were working last year to try to help some counties tap into that for some of the other things that happened, we did run into some obstacles that they had locally where I know one county in particular, most of it is used on the health department. And so they had like 39,000 and that was it. We also encountered more than one that said they wouldn't do salaries out of that money. And I don't know who's controlling what, because it's different in every county, but we did find some where they're like, ah, JRAC, you know about this, you decide. But it wasn't the majority that we found,
Yeah,
like you
right.
said, there was a few. And then, it's just, I think, some had it on a grant program on a timeline that fits no timeline I've ever seen in my life, but I was like, okay.
But
So, I was, but, they could apply, but it's gonna be a weird timeline. But anyway, that doesn't match up to any of ours. So I think there's so much diversity within the, how it's administered across the state that there's gonna be, yes, there was one county that didn't know anything about it and it was, and then they tapped into it and they had success, and another one did. So there are opportunities there, but I think there are some that, especially in the bigger that are a little bit more savvy, are going to run into some more obstacles like that, where they're giving it all to the health department primarily or something like that. So.
And not to, again, it's inconsistent. The payments out for the opioid settlements, they're not equal every year, and new county or new companies come in, other counties sort of exit out of their program. And so again, it's not a long term. That's part of why they're reluctant to do salaries, because once you start the salary and the money runs out, depending on how it's structured, that person goes away. Now the county's paying unemployment benefits, so there's it's just a lot.
Also heard a response that, there are several JRACs that do have the control or have some say in where it goes. And all of them had wanted to use that money for something super impactful for their county. They didn't want to use it to supplant something. And so we've really been encouraging, just talking to the local county councils and commissioners. And we've been asking and just saying, listen, we believe this is a temporary situation. We believe we're going to get restoration. We've just got to find something to get through. And I think they are trying to figure that out, and they are willing, because there is that, okay, if it's temporary, I think that conversation is just going to have to be, right now, nobody knows, right? We're all sitting on hopes and dreams. And so when we say it, they hear it, but they don't believe it. And so the other thing is they're very worried. There are a lot of counties that are worried, well, if we pick up this tab, then we're never going to get it back in the grant. And I think that's a real concern as well. So, and it seems completely backwards that they would almost rather not fund it in the temporary than fund it and try and get it back. But that's just, I think someone mentioned, once you've been burned before, you really have that trauma and you don't want to go down those roads again. But we're trying to encourage everyone to get to their local JRACs and get to their local county commissioners and councils and let them know, they just need that kind of temporary funding wherever they can find it in the meantime, and that we will do our best to help get them restored.
I think that's great. One thing I just want to make sure I leave is Angie talked about a lot of money's going through the health departments. That conversation had some folks from your shop and others, Kelly, too long ago, about the big grant for rural expenditures. A lot of that was going through health departments. Haven't had a follow-up conversation yet, but I think there's one on the calendar. I do think it's really important that there is the logistical problem with that I see is so many of the folks that money could benefit become justice involved, and there's not always a natural connection between the local health department and the local courts. So I think it might be important for us to ensure that we're taking steps necessary to have that connection in place, so that if there is resourcing available, and it would be a no-brainer if everybody kind of knew it and made the connection. We don't want to lose an opportunity to get that funding and that assistance where it's most needed. That was what kind of struck me, and I think Angie's sort of saying the same thing with that. It might be an opportunity for us to really make the most effective use of that money that's already been allocated, if we just help the locals make that connection. And there's not a statutory place for the health department in local JRAC, but there's a catch-all for everybody. And so if we were messaging out the importance of having your local health department having a seat at the table, that might accelerate our ability to have that line of communication open.
I do know Katrina Norris, who's over our state operated facilities, is part of the RHTP kind of planning committee, and I believe they're starting to work on year 2. So I'm happy to relay this message to her and see if there's connections with that. And Tara Morris with 211 is kind of leading everything up.
Thank you. Anything else with respect to the annual report? Thank you, Chris. And I'll leave the floor with Chris to provide us a technical assistance update.
Can I get some
Oh, please, yeah,
clarification from
yeah.
Dave? I think at the very beginning, you said AIC has a plethora of videos for our agencies.
That's Senate Bill 1, the changes
Okay,
and the
is
must
that
committees and all that.
Online, or who would they
Um,
contact?
Let me see if we have those behind, I don't think they're behind a paywall or anything like that. But, let me check with our communications director. And I don't know if I should send them to Chris or Michelle once we.
I would say send them to Michelle because she staffs the communications work group. That was part of her update she provided me, was the existence of these videos, so.
Okay, so they can't get to them yet, but
They probably are on there, just not in a visible spot. So what we might do is create a special icon or something that make it easy to drop down. And then the video we did last week, Jamie and I on our staff, again, it's only about 8 or 9 minutes and it's a high level review of the income tax changes. So I don't know if she's had an opportunity to share that with anybody yet, but that'll be part of the library, I guess I'll call it. So.
We might want to pull you in to have sort of product development for this stuff too, Angel. I want to know what you think would be most consumable for your members.
yeah, I mean, we have a Popeye meeting next Wednesday, so I was,
Okay.
I update from these and,
And I was, Elizabeth Stark is the Popeye
Yes.
representative on the communications work group. She may even have
Okay.
more information, but
okay,
for sure.
thank you.
As motivated the judges are, and I'll tell them too, but if they go back to their home county after the conference and their chief probation officer is telling them to do this, they're going to be more likely to do it.
I
Yes,
feel like
tell
you're
them
giving
that.
us a lot of credit, but a lot of authority and power.
I know, I listened to mine for a long time. Chris, can you provide us the technical assistance update?
Yeah, I'll start us off, and really I'll kick it over to Denise. But I will start off with something Justice Goff already mentioned, and that is, I don't know if it's fair to call it a pivot, but it's just going to be a new approach. Sort of talked about in this new technical assistance partnership with CEPP, that in this year we would start having some inward facing technical assistance. So I have 5 to 6 individuals that are with Justice Services Division that are going to start working with Denise and her folks on how to sort of have these locally facilitated conversations with JRAC. I mean, historically and admittedly, certification has largely been a regulatory function to ensure fidelity and adherence to best practices and laws and other regulations. I mean, I think Ashley referenced it with the changing of some of the rules, like the problem-solving court rules and the pretrial rules. We're going to take a different approach, and this is sort of the first step in it. Justice Goff has been sort of asking for this for some time. So this year there'll be 7, broken up in 7 activities, 7 different sort of site visits, working with Denise in tandem with when she's in town for meeting with Hamilton County. The first activity, I believe we settled on October. Yeah, thank you for the head nod. I like, so activity 1 will be an orientation to JRAC work and EBDM history. Then activity 2, team charter development. Activity 3, evidence-based practices overview, connecting EBP to local justice system context. Activity 4, which remains one of our top requested things, and that's system mapping. So learning how to work with local JRACs on drafting the map and creating the narrative. Then activity 5, change target prioritization and subcommittee formation. Activity 6, data needs. Activity 7, sustainability and communication. And I will say these activities map directly to the requests that we're getting from counties. I think every year, it's surprising to me how many counties keep requesting technical assistance, and that's not a knock on technical assistance. It's just, it's hard to admit sometimes that you need help. So we continue to get, and I talk about a critical mass. I think we're working toward a critical mass of counties that will have worked directly with CPP or received SIM mapping. But hopefully this will even add just another sort of tool in the toolbox of utilizing IOCS staff to go out and have those conversations as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Denise on any other updates on the technical assistance.
All right, thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. So as Chris mentioned, we are working with his staff in terms of getting copies of the annual reports that come in. As those annual reports come in, we are going through them to see if there are counties interested this year in receiving TA. We've made contact with several counties. We have about actually 20 counties now that are pending that we either have some meetings scheduled with to talk through what is TA and where are their teams at, what are they interested in receiving with TA. So we'll be working with identifying additional teams to bring on board for this year. We currently are working with 14 teams. We've recently added one given information offered in the annual report, so that's really good. So we expect to continue to be really busy working with many of the local teams. As Chris mentioned, we will also be working with his team on doing some coaching and training, utilizing aspects of the JRAC workspace. I think some of you might have seen that early on. So we'll be using that as a tool to help just coach his staff a little bit in terms of JRAC and some of the things that we work on with teams at the local level. So we're looking forward to that starting in October. And we are also working with IOCS on putting together a workshop for the American Probation and Parole Association conference that's being held actually in a couple weeks in Chicago. We'll be facilitating a workshop there on intentional collaboration, highlighting the work of your JRAC teams in Indiana. I think Chris is coming to that. And we have some representatives from 2 of your local JRAC teams who will be joining us at that conference as well. And then just wanted to circle back to your comment earlier, Justice Goff, in regard to education and just offering information about JRAC with the executive or legislative group. We, in the communications work group, and I know Michelle would talk about this, we are really focused on identifying the updates or training or information, orientation, I guess is a good word, that we could offer as you are bringing in some newly elected individuals through the judiciary, your prosecutors, sheriffs. It will also include your legislative representatives. So through the communications work group, we are going to be working on that and focusing on that to begin probably early in 2027. So stay tuned for more information, I think, to come on that, because I think that, again, is just an important piece to ensure everybody's on the same page about what your goals are, what's been done, and what's the direction, where are you going? Trying to think, Chris, did I miss anything here? I think that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, no, I think you touched. It's actually amazing that all of these have touched on the communications work group update that will come. So it's all going to be a refresher by the time we get to that one.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Things are going really, really well.
Well, Denise and her group does so much for us. Do members have any questions for her before we move on the agenda?
I just had a quick question. Denise, is the curriculum for some of that you're using for the list that you gave. It reminds me of back when they did like EBDM facilitator training back in the day with a bunch of, like when you talk about charter and different things, where did that material come? I was just curious.
So some of this comes, you're absolutely right. It comes from a lot of the work that was done early on with EBDM teams and walking them through kind of what some of the activities were. So starting with, putting together that team charter, thinking about, is everybody on the same place with evidence-based practices? Because if the team doesn't really have a common understanding about EBP, it's really kind of hard to continue moving forward with identifying things that you want to change that align with best practices. So it's really going to be starting at the beginning of some of that work and including really the history of really where did we start it with EBDM and where are we now with JRAC? So good observation, Angie. That's exactly what it is.
Thank you.
Denise, I think that the tools that you're developing would certainly be sufficient to accomplish what I described. It might be helpful to just think ahead of the next short session. Maybe if we could identify some key folks that we'd like to make sure we're aware of all the work that's been done, all the work which we're doing. We could, have a Zoom meeting or two and just let them know and maybe just do that periodically. I think that would probably be very helpful. So thank you as always. You read my mind. I appreciate it and excited for your trip to Chicago. So thank you for putting that together as well.
Yeah, thank you. We look forward to it.
Well, short-handed day. Chris Bean gets quadruple
Yes,
duty. So
sorry about
can you
that.
give us an update?
Honestly, I
No,
come into
always-
these like it's not going to be a Chris Bean show, and then Michelle Goodman doesn't come. But this next update is we'll go to the legislative work group update. So some of you may recall earlier in 2026, out of the state JRAC, the creation of the legislative work group. The first topic that it is taking on is, I think, about as heavy as you get. So it's competency restoration. We've been on a relatively abbreviated timeline. Brittany Kelly with the Behavioral Health Commission got us a grant and then a partnership with the Lifeman Group to take a look at competency restoration in Indiana. And so we are scheduled now for a couple of in-person meetings, August 26th, noon to 4, September 16th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. over in, if you're familiar with this at all, it's in the South Tower and where we normally hold state JRAC meetings. That is my primary update on the legislative work group.
Any questions?
I will say, I suppose this is an ask. Not that competency is going to be figured out in all of this. This group, I believe, was stood up with the intent to survive past this competency initiative. And so I would say it would be beneficial if you all have things that you want to bring to the legislative work group. I think we will be looking for other things to be working on once we're done with this project.
Please, Bernice.
For the meeting on the 26th, Chris, are we expected to be prepared to bring an idea on competency? What's the expectation for them?
I think it's largely going to be a facilitated discussion from the Lifeman Group. So the Lifeman Group will be at both of those. So I would say yes, but also the Lifeman Group will largely put together the agenda, which will go out ahead so that we give you a bit more to prepare for. Yeah.
Yeah, and that really goes to the discussion about helping our state partners understand JRAC's purpose. If some of this legislation that's going to have an impact on the justice system, whether at the state or county level, can be discussed by a group like this, I think that it'll produce better legislation. And I think everybody recognizes that, but folks just don't know what they don't know. So we're excited about the potential for this legislative work group. The next item is report out on the communications work group. That That work is being staffed by Michelle Goodman, who, as Chris indicated, is unable to join us today because of a conflict and double booking. I would refer members to the distributed materials that provide a nice update as to what's going on to date in the communications work group. But we do have staff support here for the data work group, and so I'll turn that over to Angie Hensley.
Thank you, Justice Goff. We've been meeting to look at what data points we could help local JRACs with start with, because that's been an ongoing need of where do we start, what do we do with it? So we're working on kind of a best practices, if you will, document for what we've identified as like the top 5 things that they could start with and then expand from there. I think we're going to format that based off the pretrial performance not saying it's not performance measures. What is it? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pretrial performance measures document that was created. And, and we're currently, I know Angie SS gave us the most updated, data dictionary that was floating around from years ago. So we're going to, everyone has been assigned to review that and see if we still agree on this is everything that looks the same or not. So we're meeting next week to review that, try to come to common ground on those things and then expand. I've also received some information from Brittany Kelly, because one of the things was on behavioral health, on some data points that have been extremely helpful from different organizations or nationally or whatever that she sent me that we'll hopefully get to include and have links to or references for when they're trying to do that. So we are also looking, and I guess I wanted clarification too. We've been working on network diagram more for like the state people or people involved at this level, that where they could find information if needed, if you have a research or whatever, so Brendan O'Connor from our innovation division is working on and Oliver, a network diagram of those. And he's met with several people and several different agencies. There's still a few more that I think he's trying to pull in, but he's ready to give like kind of a demo next time, if that's okay. But I wanted to make sure that was okay first at the JRAC meeting. So the larger one, so we can check on that, but it's getting, like, we're actually going to have a deliverable, right? So I was kind of excited about that, of one of the things that we talked about. So, and then hopefully when as we work on those top 5, before the end of the year is my goal, to hopefully see if we can get something established to start with, and as kind of a starter kit for people that are trying to figure out what to do with their data instead of, and who should be bringing it, where do you get it, how often should you get it, what do you do with it so it's not taken out of context. I think that's always a big concern, especially when we talk about dashboards and things that come up. I know one of the fears, I think, with a lot of that is that people are going to take that information and use it in a way that it's not like, losing all the context of what it actually means. And so I think we just want to be real careful that we encapsulate everything that needs to be included with that information. So I think that's all I have.
Any questions for Angie? That's a heavy lift. I mean, it's something we've worked on a long time. I know Angie's worked terribly hard on this, and perfect storms can produce good things too. And so I think a lot of the progress has just been born of the fact that there's recognition we need to do some work in this area. So I really appreciate you stepping into this role, Angie, and everything that your group has done. So thank you all.
Jessica, would you like me to talk briefly about that?
Please, please. So Chris has got, I saw it. It's really pretty impressive.
It's pretty impressive. Yeah. So some of you have probably heard at least conversations around creating a problem-solving court dashboard. 2 years ago, Dave Williams, working with our old data and performance measure collection, Angie really did a lot of work to go from the aggregate to being able to collect line level data. And so we're still relatively new into that. So we're on our 3rd submission as of this year of problem solving court data at the line level. And with that, we've been able to build a dashboard, not we, but I've been a part of it. Brendan O'Connor and his team have worked on a dashboard that will be rolled out eventually or soon. The Chief Justice just saw it on Tuesday, had some feedback, which we convened a group pretty quickly to respond to that. So that will be available for like Ashley. Ashley, I want to say, like, you get a lot of kudos, and you deserve them. But for the last couple of years, we've worked with Dr. Ray and the Research Triangle International to improve our data collection, because it's really garbage in, garbage out. One of the things that Dr. Ray did in looking at our data was a thing called a concordance rate, looking at what was submitted in the performance measures and comparing that with what actually happened in a case. Ashley Stevens, not shockingly, had a very, very high concordance rate. So her folks are entering good data. Doesn't happen in every county. It's one of those things that has become even more clear now with the dashboard. So the intent with this dashboard is not only for at the state level, at the highest level, for the Chief Justice to be able to talk to legislators about where is this money going that you're giving, sort of a return on investment conversation, to be able to demonstrate these are high risk, high needs individuals. Here's the rate by which they're graduating. Here are things like self-reported drugs of choice at intake, and what are the risk levels of the individuals? Are we targeting the right type of individuals? And this dashboard accomplishes all of those things. So at the state level, it does that for certification. It helps us go into the counties and have those types of conversations. I think it gets at what, again, Justice Goff's vision of almost a more technical assistance rather than regulatory function of certification looks like. And then at the local level, it is in response to the request for more data and the ability to show their data and make it actually make sense and show what they're actually doing. So it does all of those things. So we're excited about it. We're going to make some changes to it. And then it will be made available to the judges of those counties and the coordinators of those problem-solving courts, so that you can, in effort of transparency, have and present that to your local JRAC. This will be used in tandem, or it exists in tandem with the pretrial performance measurement dashboard that we currently have. Also exists in Microsoft BI and will hopefully eventually even go public. Those numbers are pretty amazing and show the good work that our certified pretrial agencies are doing.
Thank you, Chris. Members have any questions for Chris regarding the dashboard? Hearing none, is there any other business to come before the work group? Okay, well, we will stand adjourned then. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 23rd at 9:30 a.m. in this same location. Want to thank you all for coming. Good to see everybody.
Thank you.